Well, hello there, ladies and gents. It is great to see you again, and welcome back to Path to Abundant Living. Ryan Ruff here, your moderator, but as always, I'm joined by Matt Norman and Scott Morrison of Morrison Norman Wealth Management. Excited to jump into another conversation with you today. We got another great guest joining us on the show today. Exciting, excited one. We've had this circled on our calendar for quite some time, and it makes for a great conversation, especially here as we come in on the end of the year here in 2024 as we sit down to record this episode. But guys, we've got Steven Sisler joining us today. Steven, a behavioral analyst, behavioral profile, axiologist, and really just an expert in the world of behavior, emotions, so on and so forth. Before we bring Steven on and get into the nitty gritty of his world and the various expertise that he brings to the table, let's go ahead and say hi to the guys. Matt, Scott, good to see you guys this morning. How we doing?
Ryan, great to see you. Professor, how are you this morning?
I'm great, Matt. Good to see you, Ryan.
Yeah, always good to be with you guys. And hey, Steven Sisler, great guest. Super excited for today's episode. Matt, why don't you tee things up for us? Why do we want to have Steven on, especially here at the end of the year?
Great question, Ryan, as always. So, met Steve a few years ago as part of our mastermind group, and as you know, with all of us and what we're trying to do every single day, whether it's in our personal or professional relationships, it's how does our behavior affect how we behave, for lack of a better term. And so, as you know, with when we brought Joe Navarro on to talk about body language and nonverbal communications, it's like, well, how does our behavior impact what we do every single day? And I said, well, how do we not have the expert in this area, Steven Sisler, come on and talk with us?
I love it. Well, that being said, Steven, welcome to the show. We so appreciate you carving some time out of your busy schedule to be with us and appreciate you being here.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
So, the first question. So, how does one get into, well, what is behavioral analysis and how does one get into it?
Um, so, Thanks, Matt. Behavioral analysis is basically understanding the four primary emotions that affect behavior, which is anger, optimism, patience, and fear. And then discovering through, an assessment that you self-assess, kind of most like me, least like me, based on the old Geyer's disc model, which are the four primary emotions or the four humors. It goes way back in time to or in ancient Greece, actually. Um, and when you understand how you lean into your primary emotions, then we can predict what you're likely going to do and how you're likely going to do it. And that can be anything in terms of speed, like fast or slow and slower, or fast and faster, or approaching things like you're dismantling a bomb. So very carefully, very concise. And then some people kind of jump off the cliff and build their wings on the way down. So once you understand the style, then you're immediately able to pick it out among you. So you could see people. Then once you understand what motivates them through the behavior, you can mirror behaviors. And then that opens people up to be willing to work with you, talk with you, because their brain feels good when they're with you. So I just help people understand how all that works and then implement it in their business and personal lives. And it changes everything for the
I,
better.
I can imagine. So what fascinated you to say, okay, because you've been doing this for decades, what
Yeah.
fascinated you to say, oh, I want to get into this
Yeah. So I
field?
had another business many years ago called the Dreamcoat Corporation. And I'm an artist. So I was a custom faux finisher and did some other things. Um, my brother-in-law came to me and said, "Hey, man," because we were talking, do I really want to keep doing this? I'm turning 40. Um, and he said, "Let me do something for you." And he turned me on to this guy in Pennsylvania, Grant Masmanian, who ran my quote profile and then talked to me for an hour. And he told me what I was doing when I was 8 years old. I was so shocked by the information I was hearing about myself with somebody who didn't even know me that immediately said, "I want to do this." And he said, "Well, I have an opening. I can train you." And we exchanged, money. And then over the next 4 months, I trained really hard. Within 7 months, I was making six figures. And then I started the behavioral resource group, and it took off ever since. I've written 16 books. I've spoken all over the world. I don't really know what happened.
That is fascinating. So, which I know Scott has some questions here coming up too. So once eh, from your experience, when you were 8, are you this, for lack of a term, are you the same now as you were when you were 8? And can you change these things?
Okay, great question. So we all have what's known as cardinal traits, which, like Susan, she's the quiet one. That would be a trait. So maybe introversion, um, or talkative, or so we have these cardinal traits. And when you understand these traits, um, and then you understand them in others, it changes the world, yours directly. And so one of my favorite sayings is, we don't see people as they are, we see them as we are. Um, and that's how we interpret everyone. And we're wrong. So until we learn to make that adjustment, to see people as they are, not as we are, then we're going to be not experiencing the fullness of that relationship, what they have to offer and what we have to offer. Um, so I, I forgot the nature of your question. I just started rambling.
Well, one of the things, Steve, I would just kind of piggyback on that is what we had a lot of fun, obviously, doing. Matt and I both did your assessment.
Oh, yes.
And so we've been going through quite a bit of, the word culture gets thrown out a lot in offices, and trying to improve on that and our leadership styles, and trying to be the most effective team we can be in the financial services world.
Hmm.
Obviously, that Matt and I are both advisors ourselves. We're equal partners in the business, and in doing that kind of an assessment, it was kind of fun having the back and forth and seeing the differences between ourselves, and kind of, now that we've been together almost 30 years, it's almost like a husband-wife relationship when it
Yeah.
comes to working through issues. But how can you see it, this axiological assessing, how do you see that as an important part of the wealth management space that we're in?
So axiology is the science of human valuation. It's how we make value judgments in the world. There are three dimensions in the world, quote, out there. It's called the outer world. Intrinsic, extrinsic, and systemic. Those are the three dimensions. So those are kind of the scientific names, but what they mean is all conscious creatures, that would be intrinsic. So a human being has value in and of itself. You don't have to be working or know how to spell, or be able to walk to have value. So your value is as great as it'll ever be. You can't scale it, you can't grow it. It's like intelligence. It's the same at age 7 as it is at age 77. Getting a PhD doesn't make you smarter. It makes you more informed. And so the smarts we have are the smarts we're born with. So axiology measures how you value human beings, useful things, and systems. And there's this thing called the axiological order. You want to have people first in the first position when it comes to value richness. In other words, people are richer in value than things, and things are richer in value than systems. But most companies don't have it that way. They don't have the people in the first position. They have them in the second or third position. So sometimes systems come first. So if systems come before the people that are living within the system, then you end up with a religion. You don't do this, you don't do that, then you're going to pay, because you violated the system. So the story of Jesus in the New Testament, he comes into the world and there's a system in place, and he kind of turns it on its head. And so because he put people ahead of the system, they killed him. And so politics, religion, these are all systems. And some businesses are systems with people in them. And you violate the system, you're gone. So you're just a cog in a wheel in a system. So what my job is to get businesses to be people-centric. Let's go back to people first, things second, systems last, and get into axiological order. And then when that happens, it's hard to describe. I've had people, I've worked with them 18 months, business up 40%, just because they switch the way they think, the way they see people, the way they work the systems. Some companies you can't get in and no one leaves. And what would be the reason for that? It's because something's going well. And people don't want to put their energy 8 hours into a day for something that they don't feel like brings them joy or makes them feel like they're bringing value or any of these types of things. And so what I try to do is get people into a position of understanding each other so well, they can start predicting what each other will do. And rather than thinking, I don't think so-and-so likes me, they start thinking, oh, he's just introverted.
That's fascinating. I was going to ask you, like, what's
Yeah.
one of your success stories, and you just shared up 40%. I'm guessing you see that a lot when those bring you in, those companies and founders and leaders and whatever bring you in, if they are willing, right? You go through this assessment. They
Mm-hmm.
have to be willing, for lack of,
Yes.
I don't want to say willing to change, but willing to be open to what you have to say and to learn. Is that a fair
Yeah,
way?
they would have to be high on openness in the big five, which is openness to new experiences, because that's what it will be. And they have to be people centric as the decision maker. A lot of companies don't want people like me because I expose the problems. I had a company, this is in about 2008 in Florida, call me up. They had some problems. I flew out there. I did everybody's assessment, 8 people, 8 leaders. And then I said, I think you have a problem in finance just based on the personality types, because this doesn't look like the right personality type for that job. So has anybody watching this person? How long have they been here? And the owner said, they've been here about 8 months. Everybody loves the guy. He's great. And I said, I think you need to bring in a new person. And they're like, what? Uh, I said, well, why don't you do this? Move his cubicle into a private room and then let him work in there. Give him his own office and see what happens. So they did that, and the guy crashed and burned.
Wow.
And what was happening was he was in this cubicle and he was asking the girls around him the questions he needed answers to, and he was faking it until he made it. Well, we brought in a new guy, and I said, you need to hire this guy and let him determine what he'll do with that guy. He's like, we can't afford this guy. It's $125,000 a year. I said, how right have I been on your assessments and how you think? He goes, you've been 100% right. I said, why am I wrong now? So they did it. They hired this guy. Within 18 months, they saved over $1 million in the business. That guy had the book so ruined that if the IRS walked in, they would have gone to jail, and turned the whole thing around. And I just looked at a few numbers and saw it.
That's incredible. I would like to believe they were extremely grateful and appreciative of the work
Uh,
you did for them.
yeah, I had another company in 2009 up in Massachusetts, and they were quoting about $900,000 a month in quotes for sales. And after a year and a half with them, they were quoting 11 million a month.
Wow. That
But we changed everything, including their website, like everything. And I brought in another consultant who ended up becoming one of their employees and worked there for, several years and really brought them to a whole nother level. But I was able to see what was going on. They had nepotistic issues because it was family. There was people that didn't even know what they were doing that were working there. I mean, it uncovered everything. I had another company where the brother of the owner stole $900,000 and they didn't know it. So we caught that.
again, I'm sure they were very grateful.
Yeah.
Maybe so what are, if we can get a little bit more in the weeds, what are those 5 temperament traits, and how do they integrate with our emotions and beliefs and axiology?
Yeah, well, the temperament traits, this would be the big five. So I have 4 assessments. Everybody goes through all 4 of them. I have the behavior, which is um, anger, optimism, patience, and fear, and how you adapt in your workspace versus how you are naturally. I have that one. And then I have the big five, which is a temperament assessment. It measures neuroticism, agreeableness, extroversion, conscientiousness, and openness to new experiences. So, like conscientiousness, if you're very low on conscientiousness, then what happens is you tend to be less industrious. So you're more easygoing. You can easily get sidetracked, things like that. But if I also see you have attention deficit in your axiology, which means you're inattentive, so you lack focus, then I know, okay, now you're really lacking focus because you're already easygoing anyway. And then I see you're low compliant in your behavior, which means you kind of make it up as you go. I start to get a picture in my mind about how you're thinking. And then when I look at your axiology, I could tell how you feel about yourself. Are you disheartened? Are you intuitive? How do you feel about the future? And when I put all this together, it's like a tapestry that to me looks like a movie, like a film. And I could say, you know, you drive a Volvo. And I'm right sometimes. Like I've been doing it for so long, there are patterns that emerge because the brain is a pattern making machine. Everything the brain does is according to a pattern and based on a principle. Everything. And once you understand a person's patterns, then you understand their behavioral routines and whether or not it's going to be easy or difficult to change it. So people will say, can we coach this person out of this behavior? And I'll look at the numbers and say, probably not. And the reason being is because those grooves, your brain's a self-organizing patterning system. Those grooves are so deep. It's hard for the sled not to go down the same track every time you let go of it at the top of the hill. The only way to change that brain is probably psychedelics.
Okay. So how often when people come to you and say you do the analysis and you're like, hey, can we, quote unquote, change this person or change this behavior? How often is it oh yeah, this is someone that we can see that can really help the organization because this one or two things can change?
Yeah, I'd say 70% of the time you can work with somebody and get change. I got several people today that are in strong leadership positions, multi-billion dollar organizations that are meeting with me weekly. And I mean, this is a guy, late 30s, strong personality. He broke down crying on my first call.
Wow.
And then I talked to the owner and he's like, dude, I'm already noticing a difference. And then the guy's wife's already noticing a difference. Like what's interesting is when I get somebody's assessment and start talking to them, I know them more than anybody else they know. I know them better than anybody else they know, including their parents. And they open up immediately. Like, how do you know me? Like, this is crazy. And then I start telling them what ails them. Like, likely this is what your issue is. And there's different ways we could approach this, and then we get into a coaching, never more than 3 months.
Really? So you see that much change for, again,
Yeah.
lack of a better term, that short of a period of
Oh,
time?
yeah. Yeah. I had a guy, this goes way back, 2006, four owners. They were the largest seller on eBay at the time. And they called me and I said, let me run your numbers. And I said, this guy, Steve, he's your problem. They said, oh my God, how'd you know? I said, it's not hard. I could see it in the numbers. I talked with him for 4 hours. That was it. And they nicknamed him the Born Again.
Wow.
He was so
Okay.
different. And I got a letter from his wife. Like, what did you do to my husband? I didn't do anything. I just showed him what was going on and how he could be more successful. And he
So,
changed his behavior.
so speaking of that, I know you have talked about in the past that the future is an illusion. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes. So if you stare at a clock for 100 years and never close your eyes, I want you to tell me when it's tomorrow. All right? So there's no such thing. Your life is one long day with a series of naps. Um, and so,
I will quote you many times with that, just so you know.
yeah, that's the way it works. And so when you're thinking about tomorrow, you're imagining something that doesn't exist and never will. People that are their brain is in tomorrow, it's called self-direction. It means they're overly invested in what's coming, but they're underinvested in what is. Um, all tomorrow is a stack of todays. It just keeps stacking. This is ancient, all the way back to the story of Moses in the burning bush. Who do I say sent me to Pharaoh? Tell him I am sent you. What? The ever-present one. That's the Hebrew. In other words, I'm not yesterday, I'm not tomorrow, I'm right now. So get with it. Right? So, the power of now. There's a book out there, The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle. And it's about the same kind of thing. If you think about the past, you live in regret. You think about the future, you live in anxiety. If you think about the present, you live in peace. And so I teach people to live in the present because that's the only way you're going to get to tomorrow is like focusing on right now. Your life is a dot. And if you put a dot on a rubber band and then you stretch the rubber band, that dot becomes a line. Right? And where are you in that dot? So I write books, so I always have a book open on my desktop so that it's always in the present. So I'm always going to be writing it. But if I say one of these days I'm going to write a book, I never will. But if I open up a Word document and I type chapter 1, I might write that book now. You see? So when I'm going to write a book, I make the cover art and I put it on social media, say coming 2025, here's the date, and I know I'm going to write that book. So I put it in the present.
Yeah, I love that.
I do that with everything, filing my taxes, everything. I put it in the present. So tax stuff, it's a folder, open it up on the desktop late December. So I will get that done. But if I say, one of these days I'm going to quit drinking, you never will. But that's why AA says one day at a time. This morning, I am not having a drink. And if I'm tempted, I'm calling my sponsor. So they don't live in tomorrow. They don't live in the past. They live in the present all the time. And they have the highest success rate.
And is that one of the things that you help people do when you work with them is to live in the present?
Yes, absolutely. Yep. I get them in the present because some people are in the future. I could tell you where you are because I got your profile now.
I'm sure you can. I'm sure you can. So when you have people that live in the past or live in the future with regret or anxiety, how do you help them move beyond that?
So different things like I do this aristotherapy, which is a psychedelic assisted therapy. Like I will do some people like that. That's an instant fix. That's 4 hours and we're done. If I take another route, it's working with them, coaching with them once a week, and they call in and we work on the issues. So I created this image of a barrel, like a wine barrel with the slats all the way around it at differing heights. The wine leaks out at the lowest slat. So when I assess somebody, I find the lowest slat and that's the one we raise. So you have instant wine after the first conversation because that slat starts going up. A lot of people, they're looking at all these different slats. Let's try this and do that. And they're not getting the wine in the barrel because the lowest slat is getting missed. So I can help you discover your lowest slat. In other words, where are your difficulties coming from? Well, it's certainly not sales. I said, okay, yeah, but I've been married 6 times. Okay. Right. And I get this stuff all the time. So once I know where the issue is, I can locate it in your numbers. Like what's causing it? because anything to the extreme is error. And we all have areas where we're over exaggerated in one area or we're underdeveloped in another area. And depending on what we're doing, who we're doing it with, and who we're doing it for, that's going to affect the outcome. So I just get it straightened up.
So it's fair to say that we're talking about improving our decision making in the moment, in the present.
Mm-hmm.
How do we increase that? How do we know when we've reached the capacity to do that?
Because you have to enact those things. So here's an example. I had a fellow I started working with. He was a workaholic. So he's in his mid 60s, 5:30 to 6 o'clock every day for 40 years, something like that. I mean, this guy had a very big company, it was a big landscaping company in the Midwest. And as I started talking with him, I started realizing he was a human doing. He wasn't a human being. So when I looked at his axiology, his value is coming from what he did. It wasn't coming from who he was. So if he stops doing, then he can't exist. He can't fall back on, at least I'm an amazing guy. He doesn't have those numbers. So he keeps doing. And it's a form of self-preservation. So I told him, first thing we're going to do is you're not working Fridays. He fired me. Couldn't do it. Tried it 1 week and then said, I can't do this. I said, okay.
How often do you see that where people are like,
That's rare.
okay,
Yeah. Uh, but there's been some people I haven't been able to help because they are unwilling to make the necessary changes to put them into a position to change. You have to do something. You can't listen. You have to actually do something.
good.
So when I look at people's numbers, I'll have, it's sort of like, how do you deal with being afraid of heights? Well, climb, go higher, and realize that you're not going to die. So I put people in situations where they have to deal with whatever they're dealing with, and it's really quick. So when usually I have a company on a retainer, and then everybody in that company has an assessment, and then they all have access to us, right? So and inevitably, and I'd say almost every time, there are people in that company in decision-making positions that go to therapy. They all quit their therapists, and then they just coach in with me. And they're like, I've been in therapy for 4 years, and I just got my answer in 4 days.
Wow.
And the reason for that is because therapy is based upon a model of longevity. It keeps you on the couch as long as they can because that's how they make their income. And it's not malicious. It's just the model.
So in a situation where people are not, let me back up. So how often when you work with someone, do you go in your brain, you're like, oh, I can help this person, and they're like, no, it after X amount of time, they're like, I don't want to. And at what point do you have to say, and at what point in your career do you go, well, I know I can help Matt, but I'm moving on because
Yeah, so I
he
had a
doesn't want to.
company recently. This was over a year ago. So they put me on a retainer. I think it was 90,000 for the year. I started meeting with the owner and got some interesting vibes. So I ran his numbers, and he was atychical. So atychism is somebody who has a greater sense of self and a lesser sense of the world. In other words, they have more faith in themselves than they have faith in anything else out there. More faith in here. So if they're asking for your advice, it's not real. It's just a courtesy. They already know what they're going to do because they don't have any faith in you or anyone else out there. They have faith in here, right? So I can measure how much faith they have. And if atychism gets too strong, then you have your own version of right and wrong. So people with extreme atychism usually end up in prison. So I had some bad vibes. So I got out of the contract. I left $60,000 on the table, walked away.
And
Uh,
then did they
because
did they
yeah.
ask they had to be wondering, well, wait a minute, what's going on here?
Well, I said, number one, I said, you're not coachable to the person. They're called white collar psychopaths.
Okay.
They have
I
no empathy.
I imagine there might be a few of those in the world.
There's a lot of them. Uh, 1 out of 25 people can shoot you in the face and go have coffee.
Wow. And so how can someone recognize someone? Because like you, I'm guessing you can talk with people. Clearly, once you get their numbers, you're like, I know you better than anybody. But can you, with all your experience and someone who works with you, start recognizing these different traits to be like, oh, I'm recognizing this type of behavior, which means this.
Yes. So um, now I begin with the numbers. Like I'm at the point now where I'm not really listening to what you're saying. I'm looking at these numbers. Um, and the data doesn't lie. If they were honest, the data doesn't lie. Like that's my motto. So I will go with the data all day long. And if you disagree with me, then we'll just part ways. I'm not going with the data. And I had a guy who I worked with. This is about 2007. And I said, just something you're not telling me. Um, and he goes, no, I'm telling you everything. I said, no, you're not. He said, well, you don't know what you're talking about. I said, well, since I don't know what I'm talking about, I'm going to give you your feedback. And he said, that's not necessary. Then I knew I was right.
Yeah.
Well, we hung up. This was way before Zoom. And about 3 or 4 months later, I got a call from him. I had to help him save his family. He got caught in a massage parlor with a prostitute. He had four little kids, and his wife's going to leave him. And he calls me crying. He said, I wasn't honest with you. I said, I know. I was just waiting for the call.
Like it's not my first time doing this, right?
And I worked with him for 3 months to help save that whole thing. And we
Wow.
did. Yeah.
And because we talk about with what we do, the generational impact, excuse me, of the work that's
Hmm.
done with people. Have you ever thought about that, the generational impact that you're having for people and families?
I have. Um, I've had some really amazing things happen with people. I'll get people, they'll email me. You talked to me like 10 years ago or something. I'm like, okay, I don't remember at all. And here's what's happened in my life since that conversation. Like stuff like that, that is just unbelievable. I had a family I worked with for 8 years, him and his business and his family. Um, Worked with their children in high school, college, marriage, like everything. Like I just worked with them for such a long time. And one of their kids was on a senior trip and someone was accidentally killed in an accident. Um, and their son was a mess. And they called me like 8 o'clock at night to talk to him. And
Wow.
I get that close to these families sometimes. And that boy is now a man. And he's in California. He's an influencer. And he got in touch with me a couple of years ago. He goes, I never forget that. Here's what I'm doing now. And, I ran his numbers for him and see where he was at. And um, my longest client has been 10 years on retainer. Um, and every single hire doesn't get past me. Um,
Again, from just spending a little bit of time with you right now, I can definitely see the importance of the work that you do and the information and the help that you provide for so many people.
yes. And I'll find you talked about culture earlier. I'll look at an organization in a wealth management group, and you'll see here's the advisors, and here's their type. So who are the type of people you serve? Well, we tend to serve these types of people. Oh, okay, you serve a lot of thinking types. Um, so it's going to take a certain kind of person to relate to that kind of a clientele so that they feel safe when they're with you because you're going to be working with their finances and their life savings. So I use that model like, what are your clientele? What are they like? And I'll just ask a series of questions and I can get a profile of the type of people they tend to work with. So now I know the type of people that will cause that type of person to respond well. Um, and so I'll teach people how to read a client in under 3 minutes so
That
that
might,
they know exactly how they think.
that might be
Uh,
helpful for people in different industries.
all kinds of industries. Um, and so, some companies have what I call rocket boosters. They're just plain old producers. And then you have other people, they've got high levels of safety consciousness. It's all about preserving. Um, so they see the world as cruel, cold, cruel, and dark. So they bring everything they have into a fortified position to protect it from hostile forces. So that's the guy that doesn't want to get you the password to the software because he doesn't know what you're going to do with it. Right? So he protects it from you and all hostile forces. Make sure you throw that out when you're done, this kind of a thing. Then you have other people that just tell you the password in front of somebody who shouldn't hear the password and don't even think about it because that's not how they think. And so once you get the types, you could see, okay, I can see why they're successful here and why they wouldn't be successful here, and why if they're working with this individual, it's going to go really well, and with that individual, they're going to have some problems because they think very differently, so they'll be misinterpreted.
Does
Okay.
the does your mention of EQ versus IQ differences, how does that enter into what the
Yeah.
discussion that we
So they've done a lot of social experiments around this where they took high school kids that had strong um, EQ, emotional quotient. They were really good with people. And they took people with masters in business that weren't. And the kids actually produced more in a work environment than the people with the degrees because of the way they operate. So EQ takes you a lot farther than IQ. We all know people who are really smart but make dumb decisions. They're dumb with their money. They miss out on opportunity. They're always talking about what they could have done. And you're like, what's going on here? Uh, I had a person recently, I've been working with them, and they sent me an email, said, how 3 months is going to be up. I'm getting a job review by the owners now. Would you do me a favor and send them an email and tell them how well it's gone, blah, blah, blah. And I came back and said, I don't think so. And I said, this is your way. You're looking for somebody to protect you from the unknown, and you're never going to grow. So walk in there cold and take it like a man, whatever they tell you, and then whatever needs to be fixed, fix it. I'm not shielding you from that. Like, if you're going to work with me, you're going to be better for it. And then I get an email back. Oh, okay, thanks. I'm not providing you with a pillow.
Well, again, which some of us need to hear not what we want to hear, but what we need to hear. Right? It
Exactly.
doesn't. We talk about this. We can sugarcoat it, or we can
Mhm.
give it to you straight.
Yeah.
Because
Now, here's the key. Love is the qualifier to speak the truth. That's my motto. And what that means is if you know I care deeply about you and it's genuine, I can say anything to you. If you don't know it, I won't get away with anything.
yeah, I would.
You'll get defensive, you'll disagree, your brain will kick in and justify instead of verify, and all these things will start happening simply because you don't believe I have your best interest at heart. So that's the Aristotle way. Three things. You have to be a messenger of goodwill, number one. Number two, um, you have to have their best interest at heart. And number three, you have to know what you're talking about. And if you can fill those three, check those three boxes, the person on the other end will listen to you. If those boxes aren't checked, you're speaking into the air. It doesn't matter what you say. They won't hear it.
I would agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I teach people how to be messengers of goodwill. Do you know what you're talking about? And if you don't, you better, because that's part of your job is knowing what you're doing. And you wouldn't believe how many people don't know what they're doing.
From what you're saying, it might be a little scary if we find that out. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we have taken way too much of your time, so I really appreciate it. Scott, I don't know if you have any additional questions, or Ryan, if you wanted to say anything else, but this is very
at the risk,
fascinating.
I was going to say, at the risk of exposing all of our issues on a podcast, I think I'll save your analysis of our the different things that we filled out. I think I'll save that for a later date.
Yeah. Yeah. If you ever want a debriefing on it, you let me know. I'll give you
All right. Just not right now.
Yeah.
As much as I enjoyed, and I don't want to say cringed at some of it, but you kind of look at it and go, huh, I don't see it that way. But like you said, the numbers don't lie. So yeah, I will be reaching out.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, again, you can't get it wrong. So there's no right or wrong. The question is, how's it working out for you?
Yeah.
And if your answer in every area that's meaningful is great, then it's a great profile.
Good.
That's how you look at it. You don't say, okay, look at this now. Tell me what's wrong with me. There's no such thing as that.
Well, Steven, appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule to join us. Steven, for anybody out there who is interested in looking you and your team up, learning more about you guys, interacting in some way, shape, or form, what is the best way somebody can find you guys online?
Behavioralresourcegroup.com or brgassessments.com. That'll get to us pretty quickly. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, Steven, thanks again for your time. We appreciate you, and we'll be in touch.
Absolutely. Thanks you.
Thanks again, Steven.
Yeah, good seeing you all.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Well, there you have it, folks. Steven Sisler. So appreciate him for spending some time with us on the show today. Gosh, I mean, where to begin? Matt, I'll let you have the daunting task of that one. What were some of the big takeaways from your end?
The behavioral analysis, the assessment, when you look at it for yourself, there's some stuff that you're like, oh, that's totally spot on. And then other stuff you're like, boy, I've never thought of it that way. And so I am going to reach out to him to get a little more detail about, okay, because I like to think my life is working, and I kind of joke, it's like, I like to think that I know everything, but I also like to think that I'm smart enough to know that I don't know everything. And so I'm curious how all of this, right, comes together. And of course, I love that, life is just one long day with naps. Like that. I just love that.
That's great wisdom. I did love that one as well. Scott, what about you?
I'm a little overwhelmed, actually. I would like to think that it was a great resource, not only for just Matt and I. I mean, we are constantly looking inwardly, introspectively at our business, at how we interact with each other as partners, how we build the team of people that we want to have around our clients. And obviously we're really invested in doing that. And so knowing that there's potentially even more honest discussion that isn't necessarily comfortable to get from one place to the next best place, I think is what, is what I take away from that, is like, you're always working at it being better, personally, but also, for our business, doing the same thing. And then also the second part of that would be that I would hope that our clients who, take advantage of listening to the podcast, or anyone, does kind of some self-inventory and says, hey, here's a great way to start that process of finding out how I can be a better person, how I can relate better to other people, how I can be a better leader, how I can build my business. I just think, the opportunities are endless.
So I'm a, and right. So not only in the business aspect, but in the personal relationship area as well, right? Because you
Right.
can see things about yourself that maybe is working great in this area, but not so much in other areas. And so, again, not only professionally, but personally, I can see how this can benefit people.
Well, and
What's
also
your takeaway?
I think somebody's professional life is kind of a melting pot of their personal life as well. I mean, think about the relationships you make with clients or conversations you have with vendors. I mean, your personal self bleeds into that professional self. So there's very much a one-two punch in the value of looking inward at yourself. And yeah, that was a really interesting assessment going through the four different sections that we all had, the opportunity to do ahead of today's recording session. And yeah, it was really a unique experience. And I think one of my big takeaways was to your point about life being a dot or on the rubber band and stretching it. The idea of the future being an illusion. I mean, that's kind of a bitter pill to swallow sometimes when it's so easy, especially in today's day and age where we are all moving a mile a minute thanks to technology, thanks to a million innovations over our lifetime. But it's so easy to be thinking about the future and not being in the present because you've already thought about the present yesterday. You know what I mean? So it's so easy to be an hour, a half a day, a month, a year ahead mentally and not take the time you need in the moment to experience that moment, whether it be an important conversation or a strategic thought for your business or anything at all. I really loved this idea that the future is an illusion, and it's more so an illusion because what we do know is here and now is what is reality. It's what you're in right now. So, man, I mean, I'm going to be chewing on bits of that conversation for weeks to come. I feel like, but Steven's a fascinating guy. That was great.
Fascinating. Then you start looking at the assessment. I didn't get a chance to really go through the entirety of it, but read enough of it to go, this is fascinating to look at. And then, like he said, the how you interact with others comes into play as well. So yeah, it's
When you find somebody who you run into somebody who's very passionate about what they do, they do tend to live in the moment a lot more, and as a result, end up with a brighter future. Without It's just because they're so in the moment and so passionate about enjoying what they're doing or focused on what they're doing, that the success is just a byproduct. It's
Hmm.
not something they're really necessarily thinking about. I'm doing this for tomorrow, I'm doing this for next week. It's really, I'm doing this right now. I'm
Yeah.
trying to be the best and strongest,
Yeah.
creator, person, whatever.
Sure, sure. Well, fellas, I mean, you guys with your clients, you work with a lot of successful business owners that are navigating tough challenges from, of course, a professional scale, but also a personal scale. And I know you have a lot of deeper conversations as we do on this show and with your clients day in and day out. For anybody out there that, like the three of us, had their eyebrows raised on a few things that Steven shared today and want to talk with maybe you guys about a thought or an avenue of their financial world that today's conversation maybe made them think twice about, what would be the best way somebody could reach out to you and your team and at least just start the conversation, see where it goes from there?
the easiest way, phone call 517-333-7967. Schedule a get to know you call, or you can go to our website, Morrison Nordman, two N's on the end.com. And the same thing, you can click right on, get to our calendars and schedule it at your convenience.
Fantastic. Well, fellas, I appreciate both your time. Looking forward to being back here on the next one with you, and I'll see you guys soon.
Ryan, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to you and your family, and looking forward to the next one.
Likewise, same to you, Scott, of
Thanks,
course.
Ryan. Yep.
All right, look, folks, we want to take a final moment as we always do and thank you guys for making us a part of your day. If you enjoyed today's discussion, if you learned a thing or two, I hope you did learn a thing or two today. Uh, Make sure you hit that subscribe button then on whichever platform you checked us out on today so that you don't miss out on any future conversations where Matt, Scott, and I dive into wealth management topics, or we bring on an esteemed guest like we had with Steven Sisler today to explore their unique realm of expertise. Really just an interesting conversation today with Steven, and we hope to be bringing another great guest to you guys here in the future. Before Scott and Matt, I'm Ryan. We're going to go ahead and say so long now. But once again, we appreciate everybody stopping by and being with us today on Path to Abundant Living.